Alright folks, what's happening? Rouge again, and today we're talking about the support cells. The support cells that we find in the central nervous system, in the CNS, okay? These next four cells we only find in the CNS. Okay, so we actually have five here. We have a neuron. Neurons are the key player when we're talking about cells in the nervous system. But in the central nervous system, not only do we have neurons, but we also have these support cells. Collectively, these support cells are called the glial cells. Okay, the support cells are called glial cells. They cannot conduct electrical impulses. That's only reserved for the neurons, and these bad boys can continue to divide and reproduce indefinitely. Okay, they don't lose their ability to divide. Neurons, on the other hand, nerves, they can and they do. Okay, so let's take a look at the glial cells, a little closer look. The first one right here we have is the astrocyte. Obviously, you could tell it gets the name astrocyte because it's star-shaped. Okay. Next, we have a microglia. We have the Ependymal cells, and next we have the oligodendrocytes. Their main function is to do nothing but to support and protect and help the neuron. Okay, that's why we call them support cells. The job of these four cells is to help, support, and protect the neurons. Okay, together, these are called neuroglia. Okay, so let's focus in on the astrocyte first. If you take a look at this picture, try to find some other structures besides the astrocyte. What else is in the picture besides this cell? Well, if you look closely, you could see that, number one, it's branched out and attached to a neuron, and it's also wrapped around capillaries, okay? So, essentially what the astrocyte does, as it's wrapped around this capillary, these little slits here, okay, these little slits in between, those are going to help regulate the chemical environment of the brain. You don't want any substance in the blood to be able to get to the brain because the brain is so crucial and important, okay? So, the astrocyte helps to create what's called the blood-brain barrier. We call that the BBB, the blood-brain barrier, okay? Astrocytes help in establishing the BBB, regulating what chemicals can leave the blood and enter the brain. Also, what they do is they anchor down the neurons, they attach the neurons to the blood vessels, okay? And again, it helps to determine the permeability. Permeability means if something is permeable, stuff can pass through it. So it regulates its permeability, what can pass through. A little side note, this is a good thing to have a strong blood-brain barrier, okay? Because you don't want toxic waste in your blood to get to your brain. However, this poses a problem with some medicines, because if there's a medicine a doctor wants to get to the brain, there can be a problem with that medicine reaching it, because the blood-brain barrier may prevent it from reaching there, okay? So that's for the astrocyte. Next, we have the microglia cells. Microglia, think of the microglia as the nervous system's immune cells, okay? So they phagocytize. What does that mean? Phagocytize. Phago means to eat or ingest. So literally what they do is they're gonna scavenge the brain, and they're gonna eat debris or waste products, okay? Or if there's any bacteria or anything like that, the microglia are going to eat them, okay? Phago means to eat or ingest. Next, we have the ependymal cells. The ependymal cells, you're going to find them lining the cavity, okay, lining the cavities of the brain and spinal cord. What they're going to produce is called cerebrospinal fluid. They're going to make cerebrospinal fluid. Your brain doesn't sit in your skull. Your brain quite literally floats, okay, and we'll talk about why that's important later. But why it's floating is because the ependymal cells are making the cerebrospinal fluid. What these little cilia are, these little hair-like structures, is these help to circulate that cerebrospinal fluid. Helps to move it around a little bit, okay? So that way your brain and your spinal cord can get some nutrition from the cerebrospinal fluid. The last support cell of the central nervous system is the oligodendrocyte. What the oligodendrocyte does is, this would be the cell right here. What it's going to do is the oligodendrocyte wraps around a few neurons. These are separate neurons, okay, or nerve endings, nerve fibers. What it's going to create around those nerves is a fatty substance called myelin. The myelin helps to protect the nerves, okay? Now, what does this name oligodendrocyte mean? Oligo is a prefix that means a few, okay? Dendro is referring to a dendrite. It means to branch out. And cyte means cells, okay? So this cell is going to branch out and wrap around a few nerve fibers. What is it going to do when it wraps around those nerve fibers is creates myelin, a protective fatty substance around those nerves, okay? All right, so brief rundown of those four cells. Astrocytes in the CNS, they regulate the chemical environment. They contribute to the BBB. Oligodendrocytes, they wrap around, it's a cell that wraps around a few nerve endings or nerve fibers for insulation and myelination. Microglia, those are like immune cells in the brain. They phagocytize debris. Ependymal cells create and circulates cerebrospinal fluid. Remember, your brain floats. It doesn't sit in your skull. That's it for today, folks. And next time, we will go over neurons. Adios.